Hello, people. Andrew here, talking about comics from a reader, collector, speculator, investor point of view, in that order of importance to myself. Today I'm looking at the Fantastic Four of the 1990s. Not the full 90s, we're going up to the end of volume number 2. This was after Marvel declared bankruptcy and went under new ownership, and that's when we'll pick up the Fantastic Four afterwards. But for the meantime, for the most part, talking about Fantastic Four in the 90s. The decade started off good. They had a good artist-writer combination. Actually, it was the same guy for the most part. Was Walt Simonson. Walt Simonson wrote a terrific run of Thor during the 1980s, both critical and commercial success, and often it's placed on people's best of lists, best of 50, best of 100. It is a great story, and it is a great series, and it returned Thor to his Norse mythology roots. So, high hopes for something when he takes on the Fantastic Four, and he delivered. His art style, we'll talk about the art style alone. It was about 20 issues that he did for the Fantastic Four during the 90s, and for the art style alone, it's worth looking at the book. He seemed to have a lot of fun with the illustrations. He has a loose approach to his characterization and design, but all with a sense of purpose. He breaks through panels. He changes the size of panels. There's a kinetic energy flowing through the book itself. At some points, vehicles leave a panel and travel to another panel. He makes use of splash pages, single splash page, double splash page. Within the splash page itself, he'll have smaller panels with the dialogue of the people involved in that and what's happening in that splash page. Uh, at times, there was one particular book where he divided it somewhat in half, where there are two stories going on, not exactly at the same time, but in the same time context. So one was happening when what would you call real time, and the other was a fight between Reed Richards and Doctor Doom that went back and forth through time. And at various times, they intersected between the story that was happening on the left hand side of the book and the story that was happening on the right hand side of the book. It's a great visual treat. I've always liked Walt Simonson, and as I said, art wise, he certainly delivers in this series, and it's worth it just for the art. What about the story? Well, and again, he delivers on the story. It's a lighter tone to the Fantastic Four, not so heavy, not so serious. Now, do you remember the film The Mummy with Brandon Fraser? I think it was 1999, around there or something like that. Um, but in that particular movie, there's some pretty horrific scenes if you just sort of tell people what those scenes are. A guy gets his eyes removed by a mummy. Another guy gets devoured by hundreds of scarabs. These are terrifying things, but in the context of the film, there's a light tone to it. And instead of being a horror film, it's more of an adventure film. These things, as I said, they're pretty horrifying, but in the context of the film, they don't seem quite as horrifying. That kind of idea sort of floats through the Fantastic Four Walt Simonson run. These guys are all taking it serious. We're battling up against Galactus, the Celestials, Doctor Doom, all serious threats, but with this lighter tone. So instead of being a serious science fiction epic, it's a science fiction adventure. Much appreciated, and I really enjoy the series, and I do recommend this series. Piece by piece, though. So it starts off with Walt Simonson's contribution to the Acts of Vengeance. Now, this was an idea proposed by the higher ups where they would collect a group of supervillains, major supervillains, Kingpin, Red Skull, Doctor Doom. They're always being thwarted by a band of whatever superheroes, and the decision becomes to get rid of these superheroes. Let's pit them against villains that they've never faced before. Just throw them off their game and off their balance. For example, Iron Man would be up against the Wrecker. The Wrecker was first introduced in Thor. Spider-Man goes up against Graviton, of all people, who was an Avengers villain. So a number of books had to partake in it, and Walt Simonson, this was how he started his run. Actually, it started in December of 1989, the first one, and then there was two more to follow. This is the first book from January of 1990, part two of his Acts of Vengeance. Now, the background story for the Acts of Vengeance is that for the Fantastic Four is that they have gone to Congress to discuss the Superhuman Registration Act. And on their way there, and while there, they are attacked by a number of C and D level villains. I love in the very first one, which is the last one of 1989, that I think there was three villains, but I remember two for sure. The two villains that were involved were the Constrictor, first shown up in the Hulk, and the Shocker, first showing up in Spider-Man. And neither one of these could even get close to the Fantastic Four because the Fantastic Four's security devices trapped them before they could even encounter any member of the Fantastic Four. He did this whole Acts of Vengeance with very light touch, and then once it was over, never came back to it again. At some point, I may go and talk about the entire Acts of Vengeance, but this was Walt Simonson's contribution, and again, to set the right tone where, there's a serious matter going on, the discussion of the Registration Act, but all this humor involved with these C and D list villains. But it's not until this comes to an end that Walt Simonson really starts to take off. And take off he does into the time stream. Now, apparently Galactus has got some sort of nasty plan happening, and the Fantastic Four have to travel into the future to deal with Galactus and his threat. Now, time travel stories are a hit and miss with me. Some of them I really enjoy, and other ones I leave me cold, and I don't want to read them ever again. This was not one of those I never want to read again. This was one that I actually enjoyed because of the light tone. It's like we're not taking it too serious. And the events that happen within it can be, they're not going to have such a detrimental effect on what happens in the present day Fantastic Four. Read it and you'd find out why. But even so, you can see that on the sled, it says Rosebud 2. So again, he's serious in this Galactus threat, but he's not so serious that you can't look at this as being an adventure. It's nice that Thor and Iron Man join along with the team. The team is basically, at this point, it's Mr. Fantastic and his wife, Sue Richards, the Invisible Woman, Johnny Storm, the Human Torch. And this is not really the Thing, this is the She-Thing. This is Sharon Ventura, who has been turned into a Thing in the previous run by Steve Englehart. And in the background there, holding onto his hat, is Ben Grimm himself. So he's coming along in human form. So I enjoyed this particular tale, Into the Time Stream, and it runs for a number of issues back and forth through time. And we'll get to why, and, well, you'll see an introduction. See? They even fight dinosaurs. That's not actually the Thing. Well, it might be the Thing. I know he had a suit that he had with him that he wore, but they had lost their powers by now, had reverted back, and that's Sharon Ventura without being the She-Thing there. But here we are, back in time, fighting dinosaurs. So, while they're away, when they get back, they are captured by a rogue Skrull agent. And this rogue Skrull agent is being pursued by other Skrulls. But Skrulls are shapeshifters, and so she adapts the form of Sue Richards. And then goes about contacting a bunch of other heroes to say that, hey, the Fantastic Four are dead. The only one left alive is me, and here are the people that are responsible for doing that. Can you go and exact some sort of vengeance for me, or bring them to justice? So she's trying to get these 4 other heroes to do her dirty work and get rid of her pursuers. This doesn't show the greatest version of that team, but the next issue does. And there you have the new Fantastic Four: Spider-Man, Hulk, Ghost Rider, and Wolverine. This was not illustrated by Walt Simonson. It was done by Arthur Adams, another artist that I really like. He's got a very precise look to his artwork. He uses smaller brush strokes and a little bit more texturing. But I really like Arthur Adams as well. Still written by Walt Simonson. So here is the new Fantastic Four, and they go in pursuit of the Skrulls that are pursuing this rogue Skrull and getting to the bottom of this whole story. It interrupted right, where are we? 347 to 349. It was a lot of fun, as is most of the run, and seeing these four together for the first time as a team, it was well characterized. That's the other thing to say about Walt Simonson's stuff, is that he got the characters down very well, so they all felt like the characters they're supposed to be, including these four. It was an enjoyable tour. I'm a little surprised that there's not much demand for this trio of books. It's the first time that these four work together as a solo team, but that doesn't seem to make any blip on the market radar. So this is, well, what you would call, I suppose, an anniversary issue. This is part of the Cross Time Express. There's this issue, then there's a fill-in issue, next issue, and then it goes on for another couple of issues. The Thing becomes the Thing again, like in a permanent status type of situation, and he's off to fight Doc Doom. It's a good series. It's an anniversary 350th issue. Interesting thing about this one. This is issue 353. Yeah, I guess it's 353. And this is actually the first appearance of Mobius and the Time Variance Authority. And I say this officially is, well, it's not. Okay, so there's this book here, and then there's the book that follows it. Okay? And both of them, depending on who you're listening to, say that they're the first appearance of Mobius. But I'm telling you right now that this is the very first appearance of Mobius, not from the Time Variance Authority, and the first appearance of the Time Variance Authority. Sometimes there's a conflict between what is the first appearance, or is it a cameo appearance, or is it the full appearance. You go take a look at the Wolverine books from Hulk 180 and 181. Well, 180 is his actual first appearance. It's in the last page, what they call cameo. But 181 is the full story, and you get to see Wolverine on the cover. It's 181 that is the one that's worth all of the money, and 180 is still worth money, but not anywhere near the same amount as the 181. Take a look at the other one with the Red Sonja mix-up as Conan's issues 23 and 24. For the longest time, people said 23 was a cameo and 24 is the actual first appearance, because it's a full appearance. But the truth is that the Red Sonja in Conan number 23, she's part of the story. She's got multiple panels and pages that she's in. So that's not a cameo, in my opinion. That's a first full appearance. Such is the case that I find with this one. This has Mobius and the Time Variance Authority. They're part of the plot, or at least setting up the plot for the next story, but there they are. And yet this is the one that often has more marketability. Could be that they consider it a better cover. Could be that Mobius is down here in the corner. And that the Time Variance Authority has more impact on the story. So when you're out picking this, and if you could only pick one of the two, I honestly don't know where you'd go with that, because they're both looked at as the first appearance. But this one really is the first appearance. Second appearance. Nice thing is that they're not that expensive. They're $10 to $15 a piece for a good copy like this. So you can possibly get both of them and just hedge your bets. Okay, so after this Time Variance Authority, that was the end pretty much of Walt Simonson's run. I enjoyed the run. I recommend the run. I've showed you some of the books that I would consider would be the ones to speculate on. Following his run, we have Tom DeFalco and Paul Ryan. Now, I liked Paul Ryan's artwork. It's more precise than Simonson's, using smaller brushstrokes, a little bit more texturing, and very strict panel organization. At least initially, it's like panel by panel by panel by panel. Not much in the way of splash pages, not much in the way of panel variation. Rarely does he ever break a panel, like a fist going through a bar or into another panel. Just very much panel by panel by panel. A framed scene of what's happening. It works. It doesn't always work for everybody, but it works here. I like the fact that he's very good at telling a story. Some artists like to play around with panels and structure and what have you, and you can't follow what's happening. They leave out too much information between the panels, and they make your eye go to follow different routes to try and read the panel. Some of them are very good at it, but many aren't, and you can get lost in the story. I like a story with the artwork where the narrative is very clear to follow. And if you're going to do something extraordinarily or artistic, it should also be part of that narrative and part of being able to follow it. So Paul Ryan, as much as his paneling is not at all like Simonson's, he does tell a good story, and he does have a clean line for his characters. Now, the story by Tom DeFalco, sometimes credited with Paul Ryan as the plotter, well, it started off on a positive note for me because they, not really retcon, but there was a character, Alicia Masters is Ben Grimm's girlfriend, and when Marvel Superhero Secret Wars ended and Ben did not come back, well, all of a sudden Alicia and Johnny started a relationship and eventually got married. Too soon, Johnny. And in the very second issue, it is revealed by Tom DeFalco that this is not Alicia Masters after all. It is a Skrull imposter by the name of either Lya or Lyja. I think it's Lyja, Lyja, and I think that's because it's a lot like Alicia, Lyja, or it could be the other way, like Lya because she's such a dirty liar. But I think if they were going to do that, they would have spelt it Lyya. Sometimes it would help to have a glossary and a pronunciation for some of these names that they come up with. Anyways, we'll call her Elijah. Revealed that she's a Skrull, and has been since Marvel Superhero Secret War back in 1985. And again, that makes better sense because I don't think Alicia would have, fallen for Johnny or done this. But the story itself actually makes sense that when she discovered that Ben Grimm had not returned and she was all set up to be Alicia Masters with, all kinds of alterations to herself, she had to change her tactics and became something or someone that Johnny Storm would be attracted to, like personality-wise and what have you, so that she changed her personality. It's still wrong for Johnny, but he's not off the hook for this. But it lightens the impact on Ben Grimm and their relationship just a little bit. But this also means that Alicia Masters is captured somewhere and being held captive by a bunch of Skrulls. Oh, and not only that, but Lyja also happens to be pregnant. This is the Tom DeFalco way of telling the story, is that it's one calamity or event or significant thing happening after another. And it's usually bad things. And the ball just keeps rolling. Oh, Alicia is now, turns out that she's being kidnapped, and Elijah was part of the whole thing, and now Elijah's pregnant with Johnny's baby, and he doesn't know what to do about her, and now Ben's confused because his girlfriend Alicia may still care for him, and he's been starting a relationship with Sharon Ventura, the she-thing, who's nowhere to be seen until an appropriate time to make it more of a conflict. And it goes on, and these sort of things just escalate. Here's an issue 358. This is the beginning of also of all the gimmick covers and stuff. I don't know that you can see it clearly from here, but I'll show you this one. Look, it's got a big hole in it. I think it's a pretty weak gimmick cover, but it's one of the first ones for the Fantastic Four. This one has also got the first appearance of Paybok, the Power Skrull, because they, as I say, they travel back to beat up the Skrulls and save Alasia. And during the process, of course, Elijah dies, except she doesn't die because, you know, her biology is Skrull biology and not human, so when she looks dead, that doesn't necessarily mean she is dead, and then she'll come back and she'll be mad at Johnny for leaving him behind, but then she'll be heartbroken because he's still carrying her baby. But it's not her baby after all, it's actually just an implant of some sort of horrible beastie. Again, goes on and on like that sort of thing. So this is the first appearance of the Power Skrull Paybok. And there are a number of first appearances of various characters, because one of the directives of the owners of Marvel at the time said that people, you know, people buying books, they like new characters, so let's introduce some new characters. I don't think any of these characters are particularly great, but there was at least 4 that I know of introduced throughout Tom DeFalco's run. As I said, it goes on with repeated bad news, and in the beginning it wasn't so bad, but it just kept escalating, just piling more and more bad news for the team. And the worst part I found was little to no resolution for any of these situations. And things that shouldn't happen and they should be resolved before we continue, they're not resolved. It left me. I was just disappointed that all of these storylines just amounted to pretty much nothing. One of the storylines involved Sue Richards once again adopting the Malice persona, except she does it on the quiet. A Malice persona comes in and infects her mind, and then for the next dozen or so issues, she's a real harridan. She's a harpy. She's a miserable person. It's somebody you don't like reading about. I was just, again, a little confused about the whole thing, because these guys are Fantastic Four. They travel through space. They go through inner space, microspace, the negative zone. They've picked up viruses and beasties, and they deal with mental problems and all of these things happening. Reed Richards is a pretty smart guy, and he would notice that his wife is behaving poorly, like out of character. I can get it how he can say, perhaps one day, say, oh, she's having a bad day today. But then day 2 is a bad day, day 3 is a bad day, day 4, day 5. It's like, you know, you would be examining this to say, has something happened? Is she infected with something? Because we do all of this weird traveling about, and let's check it out. And there would be a possible way to discover that Malice is now part of her personality. But that doesn't happen. Instead, we just get Malice and Sue Richards being mean to everybody. Well, here's another one of those covers. This is all white and it's embossed. You can see just vaguely the outline of Johnny Storm in there, okay? Because you know, Elijah comes back with Paybok the Skrull. They're out to hunt him down. He gets all upset and he gets nearly killed. So he goes Nova, sets a building on fire. So then we got to deal with the building of the Empire, not the Empire, but the university. I think it is the Empire State University. Yeah, Empire State University. Anyways, that burns, and so of course nobody dies. And he's got to look at that. There's the whole legal hassles. It just goes on and on and on. And of course, Elijah is there trying to kill him, but in the end, she wants to save him, and blah blah. All right. I think you can see. Oh, there we go. You can see that this is another one of those happy little gimmick covers, and there were plenty of them. And you can also see that Sue is now in her cheesecake pose. It does make some story sense, because Malice has taken over her, or parts of her personality, and Malice likes to dress up in less clothes than normal. You saw her in her black leathers. I suppose that means malice. So Sue adopts and changes her outfit to this sort of cheesecake type of look. It lasts again for a number of issues, but here we have cheesecake and flashy. One of the new characters is Huntera. And she comes back when okay, again, a really bad Nathaniel Richards, Reed Richards' father, shows up, kidnaps Franklin Richards, their son, as a toddler, brings him back as a teenager, and I think his name is Psylord. I absolutely hate that whole storyline. Nathaniel Richards is popping in and out. He's like the irritating house guest that won't go away, but he's every time that he shows up, he says, "Oh, you better not do that because bad things will happen." And they say, "What? What bad things will happen?" "Oh, I can't tell you. It's my little secret." And every time, this is what he does. He says, "Oh, I know something, but I'm not going to tell you." And he still hangs around all of these issues. And in the end, he's got nothing to say. So, a very annoying character. I didn't like Franklin Richards coming back, as this is one of those time things that doesn't work for me. A future person coming back with all of these powers, talking about horrible events that are going to happen in the future, and he's got to assemble his team now. Huntera comes from that same future, and she's part of that team that forms a team called Fantastic Force, eventually forms, because Marvel was also putting out a ton of books at this time to try and capture as much of the market as possible. I can't tell you if the Fantastic Force was a good book or a good read or not, because I did not read it. But Huntera, first appearance. Here's some more strange things. Okay, so Sharon Ventura had made a deal with Doom. She reneged on the deal. Doom said, "Okay, well, this is the repercussions," and turns her into this mad monster. And then as this mad monster goes on a rampage, she's captured, and then she's kidnapped. And unless you read Fantastic Four Unlimited, that's the last you hear of her in this Fantastic Four run. She just disappears. She's kidnapped, and that was the end of it. And I was saying, what happened to her? This is another one of those unresolved things, but they did try to resolve it, in another book called Fantastic Four Unlimited. As I was saying, there was a number of books that were released just again to try and capture more of the market. And Fantastic Four, a quarterly book, was released around this time. There was 12 issues in this particular set. This is issue number 5, which is supposed to resolve that whole she-thing story. But it really doesn't. She gets knocked out at the end, and that's, again, the last we ever see of her. She's not captured, she's not incarcerated or anything like that. She's just knocked out. We move on. I really dislike the Fantastic Four Unlimited series. 12-ish, and it's got veteran people working on it. It had Roy Thomas and Herb Trimpe. But I'm telling you, I know that Herb Trimpe was trying to do some new art style. He was responsible for a lot of the Hulk in the 70s. And while he's not my favorite artist, I did like what he did with the Hulk. I thought it was good, and I would rather see that kind of artwork than what he tried here. Now, he's proud of the fact that he tried, and he should be for that. But with Rob Liefeld, Eric Larson, Jim Lee, with all their big bulgy muscle, punch you in the face sort of look, and Herb Trimpe just was not getting any work. They're saying, it's just your style is not what the people are looking for anymore. So he changed up his style during this run of the Fantastic Four Unlimited, and I hate it. I think it's the worst work that he's ever done. He's sometimes says, "Oh no, it's some of my best," because I think he was trying to expand and try something new, but it just did not work for me. And Roy Thomas, usually he had written good stories in the 60s and 70s, well, more so in the 70s, I should say. But here, it's just very bland, and it's the only reason that I have these books here is because I collect the Fantastic Four, and I want to get as many of complete as much as possible. They also released this thing called Fantastic Four Unplugged. It sold for 99 cents and had newsprint. I actually like the artist on this one. But the artist, it's Hector. No, it's not even Hector. What's his name? I have to look this up because I think he's only done like 6 comic books. Uh, Hitor Oliveira. Okay, Hitor Oliveira does the cover and does he did some Iron Man books as well, and then does the interior. And I actually liked what he did. It was kind of interesting. It was detailed and a slightly different look. But he's only did the one book. Even though this was an 8-issue series, it was written by a guy by the name of Mike Lackey. Again, I don't know this, and I was wondering perhaps this is just this tryout for some of the newer artists and writers because they had a lot of books to fill. And it ran for 8 issues during this period of time. And again, they're nothing special about any of these stories. Look, this is a flashy cover again. So the gimmick covers were a big thing, and you can see it's flashy. Not only is this one flashy, but it's also one of those die cut as well. If I was to open it up, you would see that Sue is still on the back page, and it's die cut. One of the things about Tom DeFalco's run is, as I said, no resolution, a lot of things added up, but tons of guest stars. We have Namor. Namor shows up at an earlier point in time, and then he just sort of hangs around for like 15 issues. Ant-Man I get, because they hired him to do all the scientific things when Reed went missing, and they needed somebody to take care of all the repairs and what have you, and Scott Lang knowing that sort of stuff, recommended by Tony Stark. So he joins the team every once in a while for some fun. And here you're seeing Elijah as well. Elijah, the whole conflict between that, are you a villain? Are you working for the Skrulls, against the Skrulls? Doesn't matter. She seems to be assimilated into the team regardless of where she's standing. And it's just like, I don't know if I would do that, but this is what happens. This could be the sleeper spec book, 391, only because it introduces 2 new characters, Vibraxis and Devlor. And Vibraxis comes from Wakanda, and Devlor is an Inhuman, and they both go on to team up with Franklin and Huntera in the Fantastic Force. I don't care at all about these characters. It's just yet another add-on of things that don't get resolved unless you read in the Fantastic Force. But I do know that Vibraxis has shown up in Black Panther books, not that many, beyond this Fantastic Four. So there's the potential for him to become something a little bit more. And it's sort of a 2-for-1. I don't think Devlor will be anything. He's like shape-changing, big punch-you-in-the-face type of guy. Dime a dozen, but you might see something from Vibraxis. And again, this one's on nobody's radar. A dollar bin. Still with the gimmicky covers. So this is the 400th issue, and it's all got that nice silver chromium spinning thing happening there. Like, are you getting dizzy yet? And again, it's just unfortunate that all of the stuff that happens, all of these storylines, and when they all come down to a conclusion, it's just. By the time I got to this part in the story, I'm tired of it. It's tedious. It goes on and on and on, and the resolutions aren't there, and the impact just doesn't seem to make much difference. So overall, I'm going to say no to Tom DeFalco's run on the Fantastic Four. Read it if you want the complete history of the Fantastic Four. But as a standalone or just to get into the Fantastic Four, this is not the series that you want to go to. You're much better off doing the Walt Simonson thing. And we come to an end of an era. This is the last issue, 416, of Fantastic Four Volume 1. This is when Onslaught takes over, and basically what they were trying to do at this point in time is that there was a number of books that weren't selling well. At least they said they weren't selling well. Captain America apparently was. Fantastic Four and a number of Avengers, Iron Man, Captain America, Thor canceled but was started up again. And they just sort of, they ended their storylines in this in Marvel's Earth 616. The idea was to start up a second universe, rebooting these characters with updated origins and stories, and this would actually be a separate universe that had these characters in it, and then the Spider-Man, Hulk, and whoever was left behind would be back in the original Earth. So that's what's going to happen when we get to the Heroes Reborn, but to get there they had to eliminate a number of characters, and they did that by bringing to a close a number of issues. This is the last issue, as I say, of Volume 1 of the Fantastic Four. So, when they go to Volume 2, which was in 1996, The Heroes Reborn, the powers that be decided that they were going to hire those people that left to go to Image, particularly Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee, and they're going to ask them to write 12 issues of these characters, Fantastic Four, Iron Man, Captain America, and Avengers, because, they were the hot artists. But by this time, we're talking about 95, or 96, I should say. The speculation boom has gone. Comics are on the downturn in a big way. Marvel is declaring bankruptcy. So this seems like a little bit of a too little, too late sort of situation. So they launch the Heroes Reborn line. And pretty much right after that they launched the Heroes Reborn line. Oh, yeah. That's the one. Pretty much after they launch the Heroes Reborn line, they fire about 100 people. And they cancel a whole slew of books. They are definitely into a free fall sort of situation. And I don't know if this is like a Hail Mary to try and save some money or make some money. And initially, it works. People are interested. It says, what's this new universe about? What's this, the Jim Lee artwork and what have you. But they quickly get tired of it, and I got tired of it too. I mean, why read this? I mean, it's the same stories that were told over the last 30 plus years, 35 years, just condensed and trying to eliminate some of the learning curve of some of the earlier material. I like the learning curve. I like these things, and the characters were not so radically different. When we get to the Ultimate line, that's a different story where they actually made some significant differences in the characters and the story structure. But this is just a very weak retelling of various points within Fantastic Four's history. It's ultimately dull. I did like Jim Lee's artwork for the most part, but the story just... I'm just not interested. And that's the case that happened with all four of the books, is that, people just lost interest. The worst of the bunch was the Liefeld Avengers and Captain America, because, again, he couldn't meet his deadlines, and so the art had to be switched over to somebody else. The storyline that he was presented was not all that interesting. People made fun of it. And it was just almost like a disaster beyond the first couple of issues for this entire concept of the Heroes Reborn. So it was dropped after 12 issues. This being the 12th issue. And they're setting up, again, this is the end of that line. Then there is a 13th issue. And they all had a 13th issue. And the 13th issue is setting it up to return back to the Marvel Universe proper. So it's sort of had a positive effect in some ways. I mean, as I said, initially there was the sales on the first couple of issues. People are interested. I was interested. But then it just petered out and people are saying, you know what, I just don't like this. I would much rather have all of the heroes in the same universe. Wasn't that a good time when that happened? So it's sort of set up that when they did return, people would be a little bit more interested in that return. And the return is good. I'm gonna stop here for Fantastic Four in the 90s, because this is the end of Volume 2, the end of an era. New ownership takes over. And moving forward, they tell actually some stories that are people that are actually interested in the characters and in the Marvel world. And obviously, they're still interested in profit, but they have an interest, as I said, in good storytelling, and that is reflected in many of the books that follow the disaster known as the Heroes Reborn. That's it for now, folks. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again sometime soon. And take care, peoples.